Hello and welcome to Vertex Solutions, and welcome to the new video series Server 2022 training videos. This is your host Mohammed Farooq. In this video series, we will be covering most of the core components of Server 2022. So let me open the slides. So as mentioned on the slides, we're gonna start with Windows Server installation and configuration. We're gonna use Windows VMware Workstation as a platform to do our labs. Secondly, we will install Active Directory domain services. What are the Active Directory domain services? How do we implement in a corporate level? What are the pros and cons? What are the benefits? As a third point, we're gonna add some additional domain controllers in Active Directory domain services and read-only domain controllers. I'm gonna explain in detail during the training what are those and why do we use those. We will install Internet Information Services, which is commonly known as IIS. During IIS installation, this is a Windows platform web services where you can host websites, you can host your web-based applications, and very commonly used in Windows platform. Then we will install and configure a file server and a print server. In a day-to-day operations, in a corporate level, user needs to access their files from the network and based on permissions, based on privileges. So installing file server and configuring based on the requirements is a key part as a Windows Server administrator. Then we will also install and configure print server on the network. So we will be configuring one or two print servers, and we will be presenting some ideas how you can make or how you can deploy a print server with proper permissions. We will be then installing and configuring DHCP, Dynamic Host Control Protocol. I'll explain what is that and why do we use that. We will be configuring the DNS configurations. For Windows Update, most of the companies use third-party softwares, but we will be using Windows built-in tool called Windows Update Services. In short, it's called WSUS. So using this tool, you can update client and server platform with all the Windows latest patches. So normally what happens is you download all the Windows updates in WSUS server, and from there you can push based on the time. You can push all the Windows updates and security, and you can also filter out the security updates. So it depends. Then we will be configuring and installing Windows DFS feature, which is distributed file system. And after that, we will start creating some users groups and OUs as per best practices. How do you configure groups and OUs? How do you design it? This is very important for Active Directory domain services. We will discuss about group policies. What are group policies are? Mostly group policies are used to automate stuff based on based on the users and computers. There are two kind of group policies you can apply. One is computer based, the other one is user based. So for example, if you need to log down certain users when they log into a specific machine, maybe they can't access a certain Windows features like control panel, they can go and add printers. It's like a locking down the user for specific Windows components. Also through group policy, we will learn how to make a network maps, how to deploy printers to the GPUs. Instead of you going and installing printers for each user, we can deploy the printers through group policies. So these are like some of the features. Now if you see number 12, it says how to remove domain controllers and transfer FSMO roles. So this is another very good topic for people, in case of disaster recovery, or in case of there is issues with authentication. If one of your domain controllers are giving problems, you can install additional domain controllers, and you can also remove the troublesome domain controller. FSMO roles is a core component of Active Directory. So for all Active Directory life cycle, these FSMO roles are very important. If one of those roles has issues, there's always a problem with Active Directory. So you need to make sure your AD is fully healthy and your FSMO roles are working without any issues. So if, let's say, a primary domain controller hosting those roles and that domain controller goes down, you can always spin up another domain controller, or you can use existing domain controller to transfer or to seize the roles, as the previous DC is dead or it's not coming back online. In addition to that, we're going to discuss about containers. Nowadays, mostly enterprise use containers managed to Kubernetes. So we're going to quickly deploy a small example of container. First of all, we're going to discuss about how to install containers, and then what are the features, what are the benefits. I'm going to explain a bit of example. Then we're going to see how we can utilize by giving a small example. So let's get started with Windows Server. So I'm going to start with explaining some licensing types available in Server 2022. Start from a very basic one. We have Essential license. Mostly this is being used for the companies which are like under 25 users and 50 devices. No call requires call client access. So it means if for any server license when you buy, in order to connect to that server, you need to buy CAL licenses for user base, or it could be a device base. But for Essential, you don't have to buy. It covers all. The next option we have is a Standard Edition. Mostly Standard Edition comes pre-installed on a physical or virtual environment. This is basically used for applications where you need to install and do some configuration. So there's a limitation for standard version. You can have up to maximum of 2 virtual machines in one standard physical server. So let's say if you buy hardware with the pre-installed standard version, you can have a maximum of 2 virtual machines. Now the most commonly used edition is a data center edition, as 99.9% companies are virtualized, either VMware, Windows Hyper-V, or Citrix Xen Server. So it depends on the environment they're using, but mostly data center is being used as a virtualized platform for those infrastructure tools. So mostly data center and standard is a core base. For example, if you have a physical server, if you buy a physical server with 2 CPUs and 8 core each, so you multiply 2 physical CPUs times 8, which is 16. And Microsoft is selling 2 cores in a pack of 2 cores. So if you have 16 cores, you need to buy 8 core license for data center edition. But in case if you have multiple servers running in the cluster, like let's example of VMware or Hyper-V, then you have to add up all those cores all together, and based on that you're gonna buy the license, and that covers you the license cost. Now there are some prerequisites which you need to keep in mind for Server 2022. There are some hardware requirements. So for CPU, minimal you need is 1.4 gigahertz, and you need a 64-bit processor, and should be compatible with 64-bit instruction set. The minimum memory required is 512 MB for server core, but if you need to install with the desktop experience, you need a 2 GB of server memory, 2 GB of memory for those servers. Minimum disk requirement is 32 GB. So for network requirements, you have to have at least 1 GB Ethernet card. If you have some older legacy one, that's not going to work, and it has to be PCS compliant. There are some additional requirements, which is a secure boot TPM. Most of the new hardware comes with the TPM already enabled, but if you have some older, very old hardware, you might not be able to install Server 2022. And there are some graphics requirements too, like the minimum resolution you need is 1024 by 768. Now during Windows Server installation, we're going to do some basic configuration, which will include configuring static IPs, naming a Windows server, and some basic configuration for the best practices. We're going to make sure the Windows updates are fully patched, fully installed. Time settings as per your region. There are some basic firewall settings which probably you need to configure based on the role you install on the server. If it's a AD, it's a different firewall setting you can give. For print servers, different settings. After installing the server, probably the first thing you want to look after is the event here. So make sure if there's any issues during installation, or there are some errors regarding software or hardware, you can go there, make sure your server is healthy before you install any kind of applications. And I'm gonna give you some few PowerShell commands. Those commands are basically just the day-to-day operations, how you can quickly get things done using PowerShell. So let's get started. So we're going to install Windows Server 2022 on VMware Workstation. So if you see, just click on create a new machine. I try to pick all the default settings to make sure the lab works without any hiccups, but in the production environment, you have to follow certain standards as per company policy. So I'm going to pick custom by default settings. So it says hardware compatibility, workstation 16.2, the minimal. So let's say if I build a machine on this workstation, if I try to run this OS in a lower version, it will not be able to work. So I'm gonna pick the server location, ISO location, which I have downloaded to Microsoft website. So I will say install the OS later for now, because let me explain you why I'm doing that. So if I pick the installer and say by default to install automatically, you will see an error which is very common. But let's do that. Let's do this way, so you will see if you end up having the error. I'll show you how you can fix those. Next, we're gonna skip this Windows product key because this is evaluation version. Server 22. Make sure you pick the location. So in my lab, for my lab environment, I'm gonna use my D drive, which I have already been configured with the folder name. So we pick I think let me just double check. I have created the server folder. So I had to pause the video to create the folder. I created a folder named Windows Server 2022 where I'm gonna save all my configuration and VMDK files. So next, I'm gonna keep default firmware type. Number of processor for now, I'll leave it as is. I need minimum 4096, so make sure the server boots up a bit faster. I'm gonna leave the rest of the settings as is. It says create a new disk. Yes, it's a new server, so I'm going to create a new disk. Minimum disk requirement is 32 gigs, so by default it is allowing me to pick 60. So I'll leave as is the default ones. So here's the option I want to change is split virtual disk into multiple files, but I'll keep everything in a single file for now for lab purpose. And here you go. So click on finish. So it's gonna create a disk and then it will boot up the virtual machine. So if you see, it's by default it boots up the machine. So it will boot up from ISO, which we downloaded trial version or evaluation version. Okay, the first step would be, in order to install server, is to pick the right version of Windows Server. So we have four options: the standard evaluation with desktop experience. So that's the standard version. Data center evaluation and data center evaluation desktop experience. So as I explained earlier, there are different pros and cons. So we're gonna pick data center evaluation with desktop experience. I'll explain and I'll show you how to install the core version without desktop experience. Excuse me. So I'll do some configuration also for the core version. For now, let's get started with the full blown desktop experience version. So you're gonna click next. So this is the error I was talking about. So you probably get this error and I'll show you how you can fix this error. So Windows cannot find Microsoft software license terms. Make sure the installation servers are valid and restart the installation. You just need to click OK and you're gonna go back. It's gonna keep doing the same thing, right? So let me pause the video what you're gonna do is you're just gonna delete the virtual machine you created and we're gonna recreate a new one. Now we can install a new Windows virtual machine again in VMware Workstation. We're gonna follow the same procedure. Just say next again. Now instead of installer disk, we're gonna choose this option, I will install the OS later. So this is a solution, like instead of picking automatic through the ISO to get it installed, you're gonna pick this option. I think there's a bug that might be fixed in the newer versions. So just click on next, pick the OS, because this is an older version of VMware Workstation, but you might not be able to see Server 2022, but the latest release will show up you the list. So I'm gonna pick 2019 for now, the latest one, even though I'm installing Server 2022. So the location we'll pick is our custom folder, Server 2022. So I like to keep all my lab configuration and files in this folder. So next, I'll leave the rest of the options as is. Number of processors, for now. Memory I'm gonna increase, so I'll make sure my server boots a bit faster, as this is a lab. I don't want to waste too much time on boot up stuff. Next, everything is recommended. I'm gonna create a new virtual disk, because this is my new first server in my lab. So initially what we will do, we'll create first server. We're gonna do all the Windows updates and our basic configuration. Then we're gonna reuse that machine by copying and making sure we clone those machines. So this will help us to quickly prepare our lab with more servers. For now, as this is a first server, we're gonna create a new disk. Next, size 60 GB, and I'm gonna make sure I pick the second option. It's a store virtual disk as a single file. VMDK 2022. I'll also finish. So it's gonna take some time to create a virtual machine. So now I'm gonna pick my ISO in order to start the Windows solution. So okay, this is so I'm gonna pick the ISO now, save the settings, and I'm gonna power on the virtual machine. Press any key. So it will start the Windows boot process, and we will see the options available for server installation. So it will take a few seconds. Now it's going to ask us to pick the language, so depending on your region and the language you prefer. So I'll keep default US for language and time and currency. Install now. Setup is starting. So here it will give us 4 options. 2 are related to standard version and 2 are related to data center. So in each one of those is a core version where you don't get the desktop experience or the GUI experience, and the one which says desktop experience means it shows you all the graphical, so you can manage through GUI. So we will install the core version later. For now I want to just pick the data center edition with desktop experience. So we will click on next. It will ask software terms. Of course we have to agree with Microsoft. If you have time you can go through. It's always recommended to quickly just read the notes. So it says install. So we are not upgrading, so I'll pick I'll pick the custom install advanced version. It automatically shows you the disk you initially selected. Click on next. Now the installation starts. It's going to initially copy server OS files, then it'll make files ready, and after that it's going to install features, updates, and then finishing up the installation process. So I'm going to pause the video and come back once initial step is done. Once the initial steps are done, it will reboot the server. If you see the screen, it's rebooting by itself, but you can also click on restart now to restart the server. After restarting, it will boot up the binaries which it has loaded before, and it will go to the next process. It's booting up the server now. Starting services, getting ready the machine. So this is a virtual machine we created. So we will consider this as a template virtual machine, because we will be copying and cloning the disk files to make more servers. So this is the beauty of the virtualization. It keeps the server OS in a file base, so you can copy that file Of course, you need to keep some consideration when you copy and make a clone and bring it back to the production environment. So make sure when you bring it back, you will do the sysprep. So after installation and booting, it will come back and ask you the built-in admin password. So this is the default local password. So we're gonna provide the password as per Microsoft password policy, the minimum requirements. So I have entered the password, click on finish, and that's it. The server is done. Now, as I mentioned earlier in my slide, let me open that slide. That we after installation, we're gonna do the we're gonna configure the static IP, naming of the Windows server, basic configuration, Windows updates, time settings, firewall, and all other few basic configuration. But I'm not gonna do on this server. The reason this is our template file. So what I would prefer to do on this one is to configure the basic settings, because after doing a sysprep, which means you're reinitializing the server to Microsoft default, there are a few settings that get reverted. So I'm gonna do the Windows full updates on this server first, and then we're gonna, so by default it automatically picks up the machine and the network card. For now I am not much worried. So the few basic things which you want to configure in the template setting, you don't want to change the name, because once I sysprep means reinitiate or refresh the server, it's gonna regenerate a new computer name. So the few things which I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make sure I disable the IE enhanced mode. This is how I, as a best practice, I always use. I'll make sure my time settings are correct. So I'm in a Eastern time zone, so I'll change the time -5, or you can change the time accordingly wherever you are located. Now these are the two things, and then of course I want to make sure that RDS is enabled, because I need to access these servers through remote desktop services. You can come enable it. Once you do sysprep, it will not revert these settings. And then I'll leave the Ethernet ID on DHCP, because once I reuse the template, of course I need a static IP. I don't want to assign it now. So if I refresh it, I'll just make sure my settings are there. You see Eastern time is there. Enhance is off, and the last thing I want to do is the Windows updates. If you just type Windows updates, normally you get all the options. I'll say check updates and check for any updates. This is always recommended and good idea for your template file. So in the production, normally we do the patching. It depends on the company policy, monthly or quarterly. Bring up those template files, do the Windows full updates, do any software updates in the template, and then we shut down those templates again for any new machines we need to make. So this is the practice. So let me pause the video, come back, because it's going to take some time to do the Windows updates. So I want to show you, like, there are some some updates been done, but it depends on the time of updates you're doing. Sometimes I have seen the dependencies of the update, so it means initially it will install some pending updates. It's going to ask you to restart, and then it will install the remaining updates. So let me restart quickly as a virtual machine. It's not going to take much time to reboot. Normally it takes a minute or two and come back. Alright guys, the server is back after the updates. So let me just log in and make sure the Windows updates are fully up to date. Alright, so looks like, let me just go to updates and check the Windows updates again, just to so let's double check any new updates available. So if you see, there are few updates are still left, so it's doing installation. So let me pause the video again and I'll come back. Alright, so let's check the updates one more time, making sure everything is up to date. Yeah, so our server is up to date. Now, as I mentioned earlier, this is our template file. So we're gonna do the sysprep and make the machine reset with few parameters. So to sysprep, you just need to go to the folder. So let me go to command prompt. Always run the command prompt with the administrator permissions. So cd Windows System 32 sysprep, and then we say sysprep. So we're making it out of the box and generalize it, and we're gonna shut it down. We don't want to reboot, otherwise it will recreate a Windows machine name and some other parameters. So we're just gonna shut down the machine. So I'm gonna say shut down, and that's gonna generalize the server, shut down the machine, and the same file we will use to create multiple servers. I hope you understand the concept of sysprep. So mostly in production, when we create template files, we sysprep those. But if again, it depends on the environment. In VMware, now the features have been added. You can always sysprep even the machine when you deploy the virtual machine through the VMware site. And we are preparing videos for the latest VMware version 8 and vCenter 8, so you can just follow us, subscribe, click on the bell icon, and as soon as we release those new videos, you will see VMware training. Okay guys, we're gonna create a new machine. We already created a template. I'm going to show you how we're going to use that template disk to create a new domain controller. So this will be our first domain controller for Vertex Solutions. So I'm going to pick everything default, workstation, so Windows Server 2019, even though we're installing 2022. So I'm gonna name it Vertex Solutions DC01. This will be our first DC, and make sure the location we pick is our training location. So I already created a folder there. Let me see if I saved it. So if you see, I already created a folder named VSDC, so I want to keep all my files here. This look over here to contain the existing, which are having to install the same problem. We're just gonna say yes because we're gonna use the same VM. Memory 4096. Now here I'm gonna pick the existing virtual disk because I already made a template server in our previous steps, and I copied that file and created with the name VSDC01. So I'm gonna pick the existing disk file under our folder, So this is the file I already made. You know what, let me just rename this to a different name. Same like so VSDC. This way we'll remember that this is our file. So I'm gonna pick the file name again. It's always a good idea to keep the same file name as a machine name. So I'm gonna boot up the machine. As you know, it's gonna say cannot connect because okay, do you want to connect? Yes. Now this is a template file we copied to another folder, created a machine by using the existing VMDK file, and you see it's booting up as a new machine. We already prep it, so it's going to generate a new name, but we're going to keep the same admin password, same time zone which we set, and it will also disable. It will keep disabling IE enhanced mode, and it will show that Windows are fully up to date. So this is a pretty good idea of keeping the machines as a standard and deploy the machines through the template. This is how the practice mostly company does. So it's booting up, reconfiguring as we already generalize it. So it's going to answer questions again that it's a US. You can set accordingly. It's going to ask the password again because we reset this password after generalizing. We have to reset it. So this is done, all the basic configurations. So let me log in and show you if the settings are there. So just setting up initial parameters or whatever is needed. So yep, we're gonna say allow to discover this PC on the network. That is fine. So let me open the server manager just to show you the previous configuration we did. So if you see, the Eastern time zone is there, which we set in the template. IE mode is disabled and the RDP is enabled too. And the last one is Windows updates. So if we check for updates, it will show us that we are fully up to date. Let's go back to the slides now. Now we're going to configure the static IP, Windows server name, updates are done, time settings are done. So let's do the remaining stuff. Alright, so we're going to change the computer name now. Well, there are two ways we can do it, either with the PowerShell command, or we can just go in the interface and then change it. So I'm going to change it from here, which will be VSDC01. We're going to click OK and then save it. Anytime you rename the PC or the server name, you need to reboot the machine. If you join or change the name while joining the domain, again you need to reboot the server. So for now, I'm not going to reboot for now. We're going to set the static IP. So it's pretty easy. Just go to Ethernet properties, TCP IP 10.2.0.0.3 for now. I'll just 255.255.255.1 and the DNS. For now, I'll just keep 888, which is Google DNS. So IP is changed. Now regarding firewall, we're gonna do some small firewall changes. It's a new server, so So by default, these are the ports open. So let me go back. So for firewalls, we can always allow by default most of the firewall ports which are not regularly being used for server infrastructure are open, but some are disabled. So let's say if I need to ping this server from outside, it won't allow me to ping. But let me just double check the IP address. 10.0.0.3. So I'm just gonna bring another window and try to ping 10.0.0.3. So if you see, for now it doesn't respond. So let me add the ICMP inbound rule. New rule port, or maybe predefined. Yeah, so we're gonna pick the predefined file and print sharing. The ICMP rule is within, and then we will say ICMP. So make sure we enable this. Enable. Next. Allow the connections. Finish. You should have this issue. Let me see. Sorry guys, I think there is some issue with the netting at the VMware Workstation settings. So let me fix those and come back to you. I'll explain what is the issue. Okay guys, I'm back. There was some configuration issues on the VMware Workstation side. So if you see, the firewall is enabled and I have put exception rules for ICMP, and I can ping my server. So as discussed our initial, we already installed Windows Server. We configured static IP, change the Windows Server name, best practices, disable IE, and RDP settings, enable Windows updates done, time settings done, firewall settings done. So the last two lines, event viewers and few PowerShell commands. So let's get started again. So let's go back to our VMware Workstation. So let's go and check the event viewers, because server is ready. We installed and do the basic settings. So in event viewers, the very common event viewers you gotta check is the Windows application and system. So application, you can see all looks good. System, all looks good, so no errors. Now some PowerShell commands which we normally use. We always run PowerShell with admin, and first is, if you want to see who is logged in. So if you say who am I, it shows it's the local administrator is logged in. So these are the few commands I've written. Host name to show you the host name, who am I. Get process, if you want to see any process running behind the scene. We can just quickly do the demo. Get process, it tells you how all the processes are running. If you want to rename the computer, you can always use this command to rename, and then as I said, you need a restart. So this is the first video for Windows Server 2022 installation and basic configuration. Please keep watching our videos. If you like the channel, please like, subscribe, or click on the bell icon. And thank you very much for your time. So we will be releasing the video 2, the continuation of this as we discussed earlier. The training will consist of many modules. So the next one, we will be doing installation of Active Directory domain services. I'm going to explain about what Active Directory is. Thank you for watching again. Please click on like or subscribe.